Hi, everyone. My name's Kim Cameron. I'm the Chief Architect of Identity at Microsoft. And we're going to talk about the roadmap for software and services. I like to say that the first two lines of every application really boil down to who you are and what are you allowed to do. Of course, it's a bit of a simplification, but I think it works for the purposes of this presentation. It doesn't really matter whether you're creating a banking application or some kind of a hip social networking application or a multi-party game or even just a line of business application for an enterprise or a government. There's one constant across all of these things, and that is you have to know something about the person who is using the application. So that's what I'm calling identity. There's really no other way to shape the experience of the person so that it's the optimal one. And there's no other way to hook that person up to the resources that they own or potentially share. So when I say that you have to know something about the person, I really want to make it clear that you don't need to know everything about the person. In fact, that's the last thing in the world that we want to see, given the interconnectedness of all of our experience on the internet. You have to be very specific, and you have to think about the context that you're in. Basically, you're asking for what is necessary to provide that excellent experience. In one case, it might be a name. In another case, it might just be a proof that you own some kind of a bank account number and some kind of a bank account to go with the number. It might be a role. It might be that you're in a certain age group. And it could even be some kind of indication that you prefer, say, Britney Spears to New Kids on the Block or Eminem. Not that I do, but any of those things actually tells you something about the user of your application. Now, when you look at the landscape, in spite of the importance of identity, it's one of the absolutely messiest parts of developing an application. People are up to their necks in passwords. And a lot of the other mechanisms are incredibly complicated and insulated from each other, divided continents, if you want. I have a friend who's in charge of identity for one of Microsoft's main flagship applications. I'm going to call him Joe so as not to embarrass him now. Hi, Joe. So, Joe, it's a long and sordid story, but I'm going to share some of it with you because I think it's kind of typical of what's gone on for a lot of people. He started with this application basing it on usernames and passwords. And it was supposed to be a very short-term project. He would get in there, do the username and passwords, get out, and get back to the core essence of the application. So, of course, he did the usernames and passwords. They started to deploy the app, and it became really clear that they needed much better account management. So back, new project, account management, blah, blah, blah. Out comes the new product. They deliver it. It's everything everyone asked for. But then the word comes back that they actually need a help desk component for it. So it can be fixed at the help desk. Okay, so they did the help desk component, and of course, Active Directory around this time started to really catch on, so you really needed to have Active Directory support. Well, there's another project. Active Directory support was great, but it turned out that in the very large corporations, people had multiple forests and didn't work for multiple forests, so there was another project. Just around that time, people were starting to use the applications outside the firewall. Suddenly, he had to develop OTP support. Well, when half of his customers saw OTP, one-time password, those little devices, the other half of his customers wanted him to have certificate support, third-party certificate support, just in case they deployed in that direction. And as all of that was going on, people started to discuss SAML. He had barely even finished the investigation of SAML when he was hit with OpenID. Of course, that brought about a whole bunch of discussion about phishing. And because of that, he had to go through a security review for all of these 12 modules that he had already written. And then he hears, gee, the whole question of cloud computing versus on-premises computing really, really is coming to the fore. You've got to solve that too, please, immediately. So that's the story of Joe. He's really tired of it. He came up to me one day and he said, Kim, Uncle, I need a better way to deal with this. And of course, as we started to develop our understanding of this and of the hardship that was facing developers, the question became how we could develop a framework where we could insulate them from this turbulence that was consuming their time on things that were not core to them. Our goal was that you would be able to have a framework where you could write your application once, and then it would work automatically in all scenarios. Write once, run anywhere. It kind of reminds me of the situation of disk drives for the more elderly people in the audience. You know, in the old days, it's incredible, but you had to actually write code for each disk drive you wanted to support. If you didn't write the new code, then you would lose part of your market because those people had other applications that had been coded to use a given hard disk, and they couldn't get rid of that one. So, you know, you had to make your decisions. And we only got out of that by having logical disks, you know, writing to logical disks rather than these physical things. So the question for us is, we know how to do that as an industry. Can we do it again? Can we do it around identity? Well, in order to do that, you need something which is very unifying, similar to the idea of a stream of bytes. You know, that seems obvious in retrospect. But at the time, thinking of a disk just as files and streams of bytes and so on was pretty original. And we've kind of been working as an industry to figure this out and come to the conclusion that what really will help us in this regard is something we call claims. So claims are statements made by one party about another party. We call them claims because in a multi-centered world, you aren't ever certain that they're true. You know, if somebody else makes a claim about me, it may or may not be true. The truth isn't really what concerns you. The truth is, are you going to act on it or not? Does it make sense in your business context? So the notion here would be that, you know, examples of claims would be things like, you know, my email address is kcameron, my age group is over 21, thank you. My employer is Microsoft, my role is architect, or maybe just something more abstract, like I can get access to a certain share. Any of those are claims made by one party about me. So once we have this notion of claims, all of the other identity systems that we've had in the past really can be fit into that model. And the notion would be, you know, that we would have, in that case, what we call an identity metasystem. Now, I was told not to say the words identity metasystem to this audience because there might be coders present. But I'm a coder too, so I'm going to invoke coder's privilege at this point and use the word anyway. And what I mean by a metasystem is just that it's a system of systems. So it's able to negotiate the difference between the underlying things, just as we're able to negotiate the differences, say, between one disk drive manufacturer and another. So what we need is an open standards-based architecture for the exchange of claims, and it has to be under the control of the users. Then once you have that kind of an architecture, you can have what we call claims transformers that allow you to go in and match the impedance, you know, switch what one person calls something word number one, another person calls it word number two. That's okay. You can have a claims transformer that makes it all work together. Now, if we could get that happening, the result would be you could write to the model and then let the infrastructure adapt to the environment. So a standards-based architecture for getting claims, the identity metasystem. So what is that architecture? How does it work? Well, we start with the notion that the application is in control. So this is a bit of a change in identity thinking. It's not sort of the identity managers who are in control. The application is in control. The application developers decide what claims they need. They configure those, they make them clear, and then it's up to the infrastructure to adjust to that. So we have this notion of claim providers. The claim providers issue the claims and support protocols that allows those to be delivered back to the applications. And these claim providers and transformers, these things that issue claims, we give the technical name Security Token Service. And you'll see that on my slides, STS. It just means something that issues these claims. So if you look at this as a model, it's a really open platform technology. Claims could be issued by any operating system, any vendor, any level in the stack, applications, devices, health monitoring systems, GPSs. Claims can come from anywhere, and it's just all an open system in which there are no walled gardens. We're taking down the walled garden and allowing claims to transfer freely as people want to do so. And that means that you can, instead of being hardwired into identity that comes from one location, you can get your identity from anywhere. You just have to say, okay, that's my claims provider. There's consistent, protocols across the industry, across the vendors that allow you to connect these things together. And you can use any framework. You don't have to use one specific programming environment in order to get at the claims. And you can use any kind of browser or client. So what's involved then for the developer to deal with these claims? Now here I'm going to be telling you about our product, about the Geneva product that I'm going to be going into more detail on. I'm sure that other parts of the industry has other similar offerings, but of course ours is better. No. So the first question is how you answer the who are you question. And basically in this new model, it's just a matter of changing your app.config file to tell it that you're using WS Federation and putting in the URL of your claims provider. And what that will do is when somebody goes to that application, they'll automatically, without you doing anything, writing any code, doing anything whatsoever, get redirected over to the claims provider, pick up the necessary claims, and bring them back to your application. Immediately you get authentication. If the claims provider doesn't want to give you those claims, you don't get any further. You haven't had to write a single line of code. You can change the claims provider, point somewhere else at any moment, just by changing that one line. In terms of what you can do, for example, well, now it's a matter of looking into the claims. So for example, in our model, in our .NET model, the Geneva framework, we have, the thread has a current principal. The current principal has an identity. And you can look at what we call the claims identity interface in there. And so there's the actual code. I could say, well, the role is, you just look for the claim type of role and then give me the value. Now I know the role in the set of claims. So it's an extremely simple model, but extremely powerful. So I'm going to talk about solving problems with claims. And I want to make it clear that I've already finished my big takeaway. Everybody can get up and leave now. Oh, it's my stockbroker. Oh no, I hate this. Anyway, the big takeaway is that everything else is a detail for the developer. So I'm going to go through that because I want to give you a sense for all of the power and all of the use cases that can be solved. And really drive home the fact that this is all based on standards. On the other hand, I don't want to give you a shopping list. It would go on forever. You can do thousands of things that used to be insurmountably difficult. I'm instead going to start with a growing trend, which is federation between enterprises, and then show how that extends to cloud services and, in fact, to general computing on the web. So let's take the case of a really simple case where you have two enterprises. We all know that the perimeter is disappearing. Every enterprise is developing more and more relationships with its customers, with its suppliers. It's outsourcing things. It's definitely bringing in a lot of temporary workers. And who knows how much you trust people who are just there for one day with your internal information. And of course, employees are allowed to more and more access information from home. So this old notion that we had of a firewall is of decreasing applicability over time. It still has its usefulness as sort of one of the circles of defense, but its meaning has really changed. We have to be able to pierce it when we want to. So let's start with a simple scenario of two companies. One of the companies has developed an application, or it's purchased an application from an ISV. It's deployed that application, its customers use it, and now it wants to provide access to that application to the employees of the second company. Now, in the past, even this simple thing has been really hard and really expensive. So the question I'm going to try and answer is, what is Microsoft doing to use claims to solve this problem? Well, I'm happy to be able to make an announcement today about what we call Microsoft Geneva. So it's our software for building claims-based applications. It has three components. The first is this Geneva framework. I showed you a couple of code snippets from it. So it's the .NET framework for building claims-aware applications. The second is the Geneva server. So it's a security token service, an STS, that's integrated with Active Directory. It's a part of Windows, and it supports Windows card space. It both issues cards and relies on them, accepts them. So this is very important in terms of protecting enterprise identity in the internet at large. And then the third component is Windows Card Space Geneva. It's our federation client that puts users in control, a key aspect of what we're trying to accomplish here. Way smaller and faster than the version 1 of CardSpace, and taking into account a whole bunch of feedback from people across the industry and lots of people who've worked with it. So once you've got this framework in place, you're able, you basically have the mechanisms in which to get at this single identity model that just lets people configure the type of identity exchange they want. If the application had been written to this model, their application would support the federation scenario we're talking about of two companies without changing one line of code. You would just add the Geneva server. You add the Geneva server at the end of your customer's system, and it creates what we call an enterprise backbone, an enterprise identity backbone. You could, on the other hand, just have it be very application specific. So it sort of depends. You're not forced to make it a big backbone. You can say, okay, well, it's just going to be for this one application. It's all your choice. And then you put the Geneva server at the other partner, and hey, it all starts to work. Now, if you've been around the block a few times, as I fear a number of you have in this room, you'll, of course, realize that there's a fatal flaw in the argument I just presented, which is that your customers' partners don't necessarily have Geneva. Well, no problem. All aspects of Geneva, and this is a key message, are standards across the industry. So you can actually, your customers can put in whatever piece they're happy with from whatever vendor they prefer, and it'll all just work in exactly the same way. And I'm really happy to announce that Geneva supports the SAML 2.0 protocol, as well as WS Federation and WS Trust. So what this does is really bring in all of the different components of the Federation world and allow this real synergy to occur across different vendors and so on. So there's no pressure to use Microsoft components here. This is not use Microsoft components. This is build an identity backbone, and let's get into the identity era. So the next piece is, and the next question that you would legitimately be able to ask me is, okay, if this architecture is so good for you, what about Microsoft? Are we taking our own advice? And the answer is, in fact, we've stepped up to the plate, absolutely, in a very full way. And I'm happy to report we're getting benefits from it already, as you've probably seen in when Ray and Bob were talking to you earlier, and Dave. So we have cloud applications, we have Exchange, we have SharePoint, .NET services, SQL data services, and everything that are running in the cloud. And those can be accessed through our Federation Gateway, which is exactly the same architecture that I just showed you of building an enterprise backbone by putting Geneva out there and doing federation through it. So it's exactly the same architecture, exactly the same approach. Now, we then so what we're doing is making all our cloud applications and developer services available through this Microsoft Federation Gateway. And again, the gateway supports standards. This is not something which is sort of Microsoft specific. You can use an IBM STS or an STS from any of our partners or competitors and go into that gateway just as well as you can use our Geneva server. Now, I want to make one other point, which is that this Microsoft Federation Gateway is not Live ID. This is a Federation Gateway that intermediates between the enterprises or other cloud groupings or organizations and our services. So what about Live ID? Well, the good news is Live ID is also part of the same architecture. So now we have 400 million consumers that can become part of this extended identity framework. They can go through the Microsoft Federation Gateway into Microsoft's cloud applications and development servers. And we're also adding, just while I'm on this, a new capability within Live ID, which is the ability to outsource, if you want, your identity management to Live ID. Live ID will do that for websites if they want them to. So once again, there's a unified architecture here. We're really buying into it. Now, we know that not all of our customers are going to necessarily want to deploy Federation immediately. And we've thought long and hard about what we can do to accelerate this thinking and move the industry forward. And one of the things we've come out with is this component called the Microsoft Services Connector. So this is another announcement. Basically, it's a fixed function server. It connects Active Directory into the Microsoft Federation Gateway. However, even though it's fixed function, it supports all the same standards. It's exactly the same in its underlying behavior, and it's also built on the Geneva framework, just as you could build something on the Geneva framework. And our thinking here is that as enterprise customers and people in other organizations see the benefits of this little gateway piece, that they'll want to upgrade to Geneva or one of its compatible systems, one of the compatible systems. So when you put all of this together, through Geneva, the Microsoft Services Connector, Live ID, and the gateway, and then using card space in order to protect enterprise credentials. We have an increasingly powerful story, in my view, and a good story in terms of reinforcing openness on the internet around single sign-on to our cloud apps and services. So we've really stepped up and embraced this architecture as a company. Well, by this point, you're probably asking, what about my application? I mean, that's fine for you. You've got this cool gateway and all this kind of stuff. Well, the answer is we want to share all of this capability with you. Since the gateway is just uses the claims-based model like everything else, if you write your app using Geneva, then you can just point it at the gateway, and you'll immediately have access from the 400 million Live ID users and all the enterprise users who want to opt into that application. So this is really, I think, a really important thing to bring to the industry. Well, you'll notice in this picture, the application is running up in Microsoft's cloud, and I'll bet you're thinking, well, that's fine, but we're forcing you into our cloud. No. You can run your application wherever you want. You can run it in your garage if you want. You can run it on-premise. It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of configuring it and pointing it, and you can get access to all of those users. So the real takeaway here is that how easily the model spans organizational boundaries. I mean, before, if you wanted to move the app in and out of one zone into another, it would be really, really a lot of trouble. Here, you just reconfigure it, and it goes. Here, in this picture, your app is, let me rewind. Does the previous picture mean that your application can only use the Federation Gateway? And the answer is no. You have your Geneva server in this picture. Now the application uses your Geneva server, which can use both the Microsoft Federation Gateway and federate into some other gateway or into other partners directly, whatever you want. In other words, again, it's choice, choice, choice. You just decide what is helpful from your point of view, and it will all interwork. So truly, it's write once, run anywhere. Move in and out of the cloud with no lock-in. And it's really a question of where do you want to get your claims today? You're in full control. So I have another announcement, really cool announcement, which is about this service called the .NET Access Control Service. So I like this one in particular because it really demonstrates, again, how the power and the flexibility of claims. So what this is a next generation service. It's an STS, it's another claims transformer. And what it does is it takes in authentication claims and puts out authorization decisions. So you basically put your rules in there about who can access what. For example, people from what companies in what roles can access what services or whatever you might want. And presto changeo, out come the evaluation decisions. And you don't have to actually do that in your own systems. You can use it as a service. Now, of course, you can build exactly the same thing into your own systems or use similar authorization facilities from any other vendor, or you can build your own better versions of the access control service using the Geneva framework if you want. So it's, once again, I'm trying to point to the fact that it's really open. You're going to see a demo where you'll get some idea for how nice this is. So let me summarize before introducing my really good friend Vittorio Bertacci. What we're trying to achieve here is one identity model that puts users firmly in control of their identities. You know, it's based on a few building blocks, but supports any scenario. The goal is you write your application once, you run it anywhere in any kind of a deployment scenario. You as application developers are able to reduce the resources that you're applying to these problems, but at the same time, gain tremendous reach and avoid lock-in, because everything is standards-based and you can connect to anyone in the industry. So that's the basic idea that sets up this magnificent demo that Vittorio is going to show you, and then I'll come back and make a few final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Buongiorno, everybody. Perfect. I'm going to show you a demo which summarizes everything of the products that Kim has presented. It wasn't easy to get one entire scenario squeezed in a few minutes. That will prevent me from going into fine details. However, every technology touched here have a session. So if you're interested, you can go and drill down into the details. Basically, we have a very realistic scenario in which we talk about three main entities. One entity would be your typical enterprise, which we will call a Datum corporation. I know the name is not very original, but that's what our LCA department forced me to use. Then we have Fabricam Inc., which is substantially a business ISV, somebody who sells application as software as a service. And then, of course, this is PDC after all. We have the Microsoft Services Identity Backbone. I'll try to show you how those services can make your life easier. And of course, we will also touch a moment on the consumer. So our story begins with Adam Carter. Adam Carter is an employee of a Datum corporation and works in sales. So his typical day means walking in the premises, sitting down in front of his workstation, and typing in his password. And then typically the first thing would be checking emails, but he sort of feel watched today, so he won't do it. And since he works in sales, the first item will be working with CRM, of course, because his customers are his life. So he goes straight, double-click on CRM, and he is now in his application. And as you can see here, he has all his contacts and similar. The application recognized him. Here you can see that Adam Carter, a Datum corporation. However, there is an interesting factlet here, and is that this is not a Datum intranet. This is a service that is hosted by Microsoft, the Microsoft Dynamics Online CRM. However, I didn't have to type any username and password. I just double-clicked, went straight, and all my data were there. So how did that happen? That happened thanks to the technologies that Kim mentioned. So basically here, I had Adam on his domain client. What happened is that Adam, or better, his browser went back to the Microsoft Services Connector, which is this appliance that is able to have identities to go around. He got back a token that played with the Microsoft Federation Gateway, where it was verified that a Datum is in a federation with Microsoft, got back a token, and then went to CRM Online. However, Adam is blissfully ignorant of all this. He just double-clicked, and magic happens. And that's what happens when you play with claims. So let's say that the Datum management was supremely impressed by this achievement and decided to invest heavily in this approach and use federation with as many business partners as possible. So they upgraded from the Microsoft Services Connector, which is a fantastic way, a point-and-click way of connecting to the Microsoft services to a full-fledged Geneva server, which substantially allow you to manage arbitrary federations. And the first beneficiary of this is our friend Fabricam, which substantially gets to sell his application by using claims. So let's go back to Adam and his workstation. Let's say that Adam closed a sale with his favorite customer, Dan Park. And so he sets up for sending a package to Dan with the item that he sold. The application that Fabricam sells is an application for shipping data, shipping packages, in which substantially, as you can see, again, the drill is exactly the same. I double-clicked, the system recognized me, I'm in. And again, this is not my intranet. This is the ISV. But thanks to the federation, we went straight. Now, let's go ahead and create the shipment. Here I have my summary. You may notice here that I have a list of data about the sender. Those are precompiled, thanks to the fact that the federation between Edatum and Fabricam includes this number of claims as the information that I want to send. And so here the application is just making use of it. So let's say that we want to pick done. We submit our package. We get confirmation. We ship it. Perfect. Here we have a label. I can print it, put it on my package, and I'm done. So let's take a peek behind the scenes on how this happened. And let's go first on how we produced those claims. The machine you see here is one server on the Edatum network. Let's say it's the domain controller. And here I have the Microsoft Management Console of Geneva Server, the product that Kim just announced. That's substantially the STS of your Edatum corporation. Here you can see how I can manage practically every aspect of my relationships. And again, I won't go into the details, but you'll have the same from various other sessions. The part that we are seeing here is substantially the relying parties. That's to say, all the entities to which I'm willing to give tokens. And here we have a list. The first line represents the Microsoft Federation Gateway. If I would be using the Microsoft Services connector, then all these would be completely automatic, transparent. I wouldn't know even that it's there, but it would work by magic. And with a Geneva server, it's easy enough to reproduce the same. And at the same time, I have my chance of talking with arbitrary entities, like, for example, Fabricam Shipping. And here I have a list of claims that I'm willing to disclose. For example, in this case, we made some custom claims like PDC mail, just for showing you that I can have anything arbitrary. The content of these claims is exactly what you have in your Active Directory. This is capitalizing on your investment in Active Directory, so that I can just make this information and, in form of claims, make it travel beyond my boundaries. And that's it for the producing side. So now let's think for a moment about consuming side. So was it difficult for Fabricam to actually consume those claims? And here, if you have seen the very first slide with code that Kim has shown, you'll know that it wasn't difficult at all. What we have here is a classic ASP.NET application. Nothing fancy, nothing esoteric, just ASP.NET. The only difference is that we are using the Geneva framework, which you may have heard of in the past as Zermat. Today is called the Geneva framework. And it's very easy to enable it, exactly like Kim has shown. Here I just added a couple of lines of code saying, hey, I wanted to get claims from Edatum corporations. And I added a few other details, but in the end, it's just a cut and paste, very, very straightforward. If I see things from the developer perspective, that's even easier. Here, you may recall the page of a new shipment where I had all my claims. This is the code behind that page, and it's really, really, really straightforward. Here I'm just making a link query on the claims. And you may notice that I have nothing specific about the technology. Did I get these through SAML, through X509? Who cares? I'm writing the code behind of a web page. I'm not a security expert. I shouldn't know those details. And thanks to this framework, I don't need to. We basically ejected the authentication logic outside of the application, and it wasn't soon enough. OK, so now that we have seen how this worked, let's say that end of the day, Adam goes home, so close his laptop and leave the premises. Goes home, he's having dinner, and he's bragging about his fantastic sale, and it occurs to him. He sent it to the wrong address. He was supposed to update the CRM, he didn't, but never fear. Goes in it, then opens his laptop, and let's see what happens. Basically, he goes back to his shipping application, access it, and what happens now is that he is not sitting in his network. He is at home. So before, when I made the access to the shipping application, basically I was already authenticated with my STS. Kerberos take care of that. However, here I am in a completely different network. So I can still access the services of STS, but I need to authenticate myself. The page that you see here is the default Geneva server page, and the services connector has a similar page. Your administrator can decide which kind of authentication you are supposed to use from home. And here I just left all of them for showing you, but if you want to restrict just use smart card, you can. However, that gives me the perfect excuse for showing you the next generation of Windows card space. As you can see, this is a very streamlined experience. I clicked, less than a second later, this dialog showed up. And we see, again, I won't go into the details because there is an entire session on this, and I invite you to go and see it. But this is really, really straightforward. So here I will put my domain credentials. I was going to put my personal credential for the Microsoft network. Would have been a bad idea. And again, in a very short time, we managed to get to the application, which is thinking for a moment, but because IIS is trying to rebuild it. So while it does that, let's just take a look at what happened. Basically, Adam was here. What he did was trying to access this application. This application asked for a token here. Then he asked for it, but he didn't have a privilege, and so went back and forth. And now that's what we are trying to do with CardSpace, which somehow, sorry, I just had to click that last step. And I mean, that's exactly like being sitting in my office, which has its downside, because that means that you never stop working. But at the same time, this is extremely empowering. So let's go on the manage shipment. Let's retrieve our done park shipment. Let's try reroute. Let's see. Let's say that I changed the address. Reroute. Oh, what happened? Error. So that's by design. What happened is that the management of the datum is a bit tight. And when you make things like rerouting, you actually pay a price for it. So they decided that, as a rule, only if you own a budget, you can actually make those changes. And Adam is not a manager. So the only option he has is closing, going back to the dinner table, and substantially something very strange happened. But luckily it stopped before I get an heart attack. Then his only chance is actually going back to sleep, and then the day after goes back to work, goes to his manager and says, guys, I understand that there is a price involved. However, there is a bigger price if I am not empowered to do that. Because now we are 1 day late, we will spend more. So please, can we make these go away? And strange enough, because I don't know if you ever tried to talk with your administrators, usually enters one ear, comes out the other. They don't care. Anyway, this is a fictional environment, so we can dream. And let's say that the administrators actually decide that they want to make the change. And normally here, the nightmare would begin. Because if you played with authorization a bit, you know that this stuff is buried deep into the code of the application. Who knows where it's happening? So you start, you search, you find out who wrote it, finally you find it, you try to understand how it works, you believe that you finally got it, you change, and then you start getting phone calls from other subsidiaries saying, hey, my stuff stopped working. And maybe it had nothing to do with that. That's how authorization works. But never fear, because Fabricam was intelligent enough to use an external service for this, an external service which is based on claim transformation and goes under the name of .NET Access Control Service. So let's take a look at this. I assume that you were all at the keynote. Can I ask to all the ones that were at the keynote to raise their hands? I knew it. I just wanted to see if you are alive. Sorry. It's a presenter trick. OK. So I'm sure that you have seen this portal. This is basically a portal where I can manage my settings of my .NET services, so not just the access control. So in here, I have my Fabricam shipping project. I have the access control service. And here, we will be able to see the rules that perform the mapping between input and output. And of course, now everybody has seen it from the keynote, so everybody is hitting on it. So the poor website is sort of thinking about it. So there are basically two ways of changing my settings. I can go through the portal, like the one that I'm showing you, or I can leverage the management APIs. And to this respect, my team, which is the Cloud Services Evangelism team, built basically a sample application where we show how you could use the management APIs, use your own view of things, and substantially make those changes. So in this case here, you can see that on this side I have all the Azure services, not just the access control. And on this main view, I actually have all the main actors. For example, on this side, I have all the claim providers that I can use. If I want to add them, I can add them. I have my mapping rules, the rules that Kim described before. So here, there is no confusion, there is no digging in code that is 20 years old, in Fortran 77 maybe. Here, it's very clear what's happening. Here I have managers that are mapping in their role shipping modifier. So managers, the one in the groups in the datum that are managers, can change shipments. Then I have domain users, that pretty much means everybody in Active Directory can create shipments. So what I needed to do here, I just needed to change the rule. Not hard. So let's go back here and let's try to do it through the portal, which should come in soon enough. Or on the other end, we may even try to do it for this. This tool that I'm showing, we are going to publish the source code, so if you want to see it. And if it fails, it's a sample, so don't throw items at me. No, emails, that's OK. Items, less. OK, so here we can see that the UI for changing rules is really straightforward. In theory, you should be able to just type domain users, and then I will use an API for performing the change on the server, and now it claims that it did it. Here it's still going, so let's assume that it did it. Then we can go back to our client. We can reopen our shipping, and this time we are back to the internet, so straight without having anything in the middle. We go on the manage shipments, we pick our shipment, we try to reroute, we reroute, and this time it worked. So for changing access rules, that normally, again, is a crusade and a nightmare mixed together, now I just made a couple of clicks, everything worked. If that's not awesome, I don't know what awesome is. Thank you. Thank you. Right, so we are almost done. Then I'll give back to my friend Kim. Let's say that at this point, we can think about the recipient of this shipment, Dan Park. Dan Park bought this item, the mysterious item that I'm not telling what it is, and he'd like to track the package, which is very natural. So this is a value-add service that Fabricam can offer to their customers. They built a public website that basically allows you to sign in, and you see all the list of your packages. However, the interesting part is that the customer of Fabricam is a datum, is not the end user. This is a value-add, not core business. So it's not something on which Fabricam is willing to spend a lot. For example, why should I bother for things like managing lost passwords for the end users? I'm not getting any direct revenues for them. So here the trick is very simple. I'm using Live ID. I just set up a website that goes on my backend. And at this point, my end user was profiled together with their own Live ID, so I don't know any details of that. And at this point, Dan can just go to the public website, sign in with his Live ID, and you may notice here that he can also do it with an information card. At this point, we will have a list of the various shipments that were sent using Fabricam. We can just click on it, and of course Redmond, because it's the only US address that I'm able to type. In Italy, addresses are different. And that's it. That's very simple. So we made it through the entire demo. And just to summarize, all those pink arrows that you see are actually all based on open standards. That's to say that you want to take any of those components, you want to substitute it with something written with another platform, with another product. As a shareholder, I'm appalled. But as a computer scientist, I'm glad that you are able to do so. However, I'm seeing some faces with disbelief. So I'm afraid that the only option to convince you is actually to show you. And so I don't know if I am actually doing it. Is it projecting? Yeah, it's C, but niente. Is not coming out. Now this one is the old one. And unfortunately, C is not transmitting. So, of course, the demo gods were not pleased with my performance. So they decided to make me do some physical work since I am out of shape. So let's see what happens if I reconnect another one. Let's try D. And maybe this time it will be happier. But it's not. Okay, so.
We believe you anyway.
No. It's a matter of principle. I mean, it cannot be just a projector between. We got an arrow. Ah, see? Good. So, here we introduced a new actor in the picture, which is an IBM services provider. This is substantially a relying party that is built on, I hope I'm getting the name of the product right. If I don't, forgive me. Is built on Tivoli Federation Manager. It's a product from IBM. And our engineers and the IBM engineers set this stuff up literally in a matter of hours. Now, if I double-click on this guy, I'm going to land on a page, which, as you can see, has a big IBM logo, so I'm not lying to you. And we have a number of possible authentication methods. The relying party behind this page is in federation with an instance of Geneva Server, which again, I underline, just hours to set it up. And I can actually choose any system from these, but I think that I want the maximum effect. So I'll choose the system that you least expect, which happens to be SAML 2.0. And with SAML, I mean the protocol. That's to say that it's years that we say we support SAML token. Today, Kim announced that we are supporting the protocol. So I click on it, and we won't see much because it's all happening on the network. But in a short, we will see. Also talking like that is a presenter trick, but there's a limit to how I can do it. OK, what you can see here is a list of claims that were originated by a Geneva server, were transmitted via the SAML2 protocol, and were consumed by an IBM relying party. So all the things that I've shown you today, all the things that Kim has talked about today, can work on any platform as long as standards are used. I'll tell you more. They can work easily because, again, setting this stuff up was literally hours. Our engineers are very good, but the product is good as well. And that said, I'm giving back the floor to Kim. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vittorio. I love to watch you ejecting authentication from the application. I think that's got to be our new slogan. So let's go ahead here and think about just a few more things, and then I'll come to the actual roadmap. The goal here is really a flexible and granular trust policy. I mean, the notion is that the decisions about access control and personalization belong to the people responsible for the resources and the information. So, for example, at Microsoft, our live services all trust the Microsoft Federation Gateway. That gives us common management internally. It gives us quality assurance, and it ensures there's a certain security bar across all of our properties. But that isn't the end of the story. Our model fully supports flexible, granular trust policies and understands that those decisions start with the application. The application is, as I said earlier, in control. And so we have some examples, too, of exceptions to the rule, if you want. So when you're running inside Azure, you don't have to use the Microsoft Gateway. There's no requirement. It's all a matter of choice. You can use a third-party framework. You can use non-standard protocols. You can use third-party STSs, and so on, and just go directly in and out of our backbone. Another example would be this .NET Access Control Service. It is, after all, a security piece, a security component in which you're delegating authorization to an external service. You may not want to go through an intermediary like a gateway. You may want it to be extremely direct because of the trustworthy computing requirements of that. So that's fine. You just go directly, and you get that federation. So the gateway is something that gives you a lot of synergy, but it isn't something that is the only way of doing things. Another example for that would be Health Vault. So at Health Vault, we made the decision right from day one that we wanted to be able to accept identities from a set of really well-run, secure, OpenID providers. And we continue to do that. That's a specific trust decision by the Health Vault people. Of course, they also interoperate perfectly with Microsoft's Federation Gateway. But by doing that, they also basically are serving as a pilot for our whole backbone. In other words, we're able to play with and study the effects of working with that protocol in that area and decide how we're going to continue with the rest of the backbone. Now, speaking of OpenID, I'm really happy to announce today that one of the things we're doing is taking our 400 million live ID users and giving them access as OpenID accounts. So basically, you know, there's so much password fatigue at the long tail end of the spectrum. All of those social networking sites, the blogging sites, consumer services sites, and so on. So you'll be able to use your Live ID to log into those sites through OpenID. That, I think, is an important contribution, too. I'd also like to... Hey, we'll get there one of these days. Keep moving. There's also the Live framework. The Live framework is a way to get really tight integration with Live. It's super efficient, a safe protocol. Gives you access to all of the same technology we use inside our own cloud. So you still get the access to the Live accounts and the Federation Gateway, and you can use the framework through any of 7 different languages that it's supported in. So that's an option for people who are integrating into the Live environment and want all of the facilities that go with that. Once again, it's a matter of choice. The application is in control. So you always have your choice of framework. You have your choice of protocol. So let me start to summarize here. The Microsoft Identity Software and Services Strategy is a rich set of options, and it supports virtually every identity scenario, as I'm sure you understand only too well by this point. The architecture is the same whether it's on premises with Geneva Server or using services in the cloud. Enterprises can federate with the online backbone in the same way they federate to other enterprises. So we are typical of what we're proposing for our customers. You can go through the services gateway. That gives you the access to Live ID consumers as well as managed identities. You can start off with a really simple services connector and then upgrade. And you can even use our gateway in order to simplify identity management with other partners. And above all, the programming model used by developers remains the same. One identity model that puts users of software and services firmly in control of their identity. Here we're showing the fact, I think, that the app drives everything. The transition to the services-based world requires both services and software. And we think we can help. The claims-based model is one in which none of the pieces are mandatory. None of the things shown on this slide are required pieces in order to gain benefit from a model. It's really a matter of picking the pieces of the possible solution that are relevant to you and just not worrying about the rest. The app drives everything. Open standards are what allow you to bring in your third parties, and we think are going to be the basis of a great deal of synergy in the industry. So now, here's our roadmap. Geneva server, you can see the now column. The Microsoft Services Connector is in what we call community technical preview. Geneva Framework and Card Space are in beta 1. The Live framework is in production. And then in services, we have the OpenID beta. Microsoft Federation Gateway is in production, and .NET Control Services CTP. And you can see where things are going there moving forward towards 2009 RTM. So elsewhere at the conference, you can really drill down on this. There are 7 more talks. Today there are 2 more. At 1:45, you can catch the Geneva Server framework overview. And there we'll have an example, an end-to-end example of creating and deploying an app from scratch. So you'll really get to see all of the details. At 3:30, There's a presentation on connecting Active Directory to Microsoft services, which takes you through the Microsoft connector. And I think that's interesting because it'll give you a full understanding of the impact that that kind of a focused solution can have. And it also tells you a lot about what you could do with Geneva if you wanted to. And I want to underline the fact that those of us who are working on identity at Microsoft are here in force. You're certainly invited to talk to us in the lab, the lounge, the booth, the Ask the Experts, and so on. So you decide what claims you need. You program to the claims model. You choose where to get the claims from. And here, this is very, very open in terms of your options, whatever you want. And above all, you're not dependent on anything. What if your customer doesn't have an STS yet? Well, no problem. Just embed Geneva Claims Provider into your app. Then when the customer starts to say, I want more features, you say, up. Use Geneva or one of the similar components, and you'll get all of that upsell. And you don't have to be caught, like my friend Joe, in this perpetual cycle of developing all of these specific capabilities. So, in conclusion, I'm going to tell you a story. I once went to a hypnotist and asked him to help me stop smoking. But the cure wasn't immediate. It took about 20 years before it hit. But there was one very cool thing about that session. And that was the way he ended it. So I'm gonna try it out now. Now I have to warn you that I have no professional training, so I want everybody to be careful here. When I stop talking, you're going to forget all the twists and turns of the deployment scenarios you've just seen. And you're only going to remember how easy that there are open standards everywhere, that it's write once, run anywhere, that there are cool components, and one model that puts users in control and works with software from all the other vendors.